Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Inquiring Minds Want to Know with Tulsa Master Gardeners. I'm Tom Ingram here with Brian. How you doing, Brian?
Hello, everyone. I'm good.
Yeah, we're back here again this week to see if you can stump us with your questions. Inquiring Minds Want to Know. All these questions come from kids just like you that they've asked these questions, and we've got some very good questions again this week, Brian.
Tom, they've got harder. The first episode, the questions were pretty easy, and I said, oh, yeah, this is easy. Now they're trying to stump us pretty good, Tom, so we'll see. We'll see.
All right, well, let's get started. So our first question today, this is a great question. It was like, where could you start a garden? And
Great question.
Mine is almost anywhere. Right. We got sun and water and soil and nutrients, and that can be a lot of different places.
Yeah. So I like that answer anywhere. I mean, you can go on from, planting it pretty traditionally in a row and in a vegetable garden that's already there, or, we can plant some lettuce in a container in the house and, grow it that way. So there's a lot of options for everybody. There's a garden opportunity for everybody out there, Tom.
Right. Probably the main one that we usually think about when we think of a garden, it would be what we would call an in-ground garden, where it's a place in your yard or maybe somewhere else where you've tilled up the soil and worked on the soil and you're growing your plants in the ground. That's kind of what we naturally think. But there's also, you can grow plants in containers. There's all different types of containers that can be fancy. Like this one here is just kind of a metal watering, well, it's not really a bucket. I don't know what you call that, but it's larger than a bucket, but you can put some soil in there, drill some holes in the bottom so the water can drain out, not just fill up, and you can grow plants in there. You can grow plants, like if you don't have a yard, like if you live in an apartment or something, you can get one of those utility buckets, like at one of the big box stores, like they cost about $5. Get some garden soil, get a tomato plant. You've got a garden right there. So there's lots of different ways. An interesting one, though, Brian, I've seen people do is straw bale gardens, growing in actually a bale of straw. How does that work?
So this is an interesting one too, and a very easy one. And a lot of times, what we do, we plant those right in that straw bale. And so, in the fall when we have Halloween, we usually have wheat straw. A lot of times, we let those sit out all winter. And so they've broke down, and we can actually just plant, let's say, our tomato plants. We plant directly into that straw, and we're going to have to water a little more often. But as that hay breaks down, or as that straw breaks down, it provides a pretty good soil for our plants, our vegetables that we put in there. So as it breaks down, our tomatoes or whatever we put in there, it will pull up that nutrients and we'll have a great little garden from that bale of straw that we had in Halloween last October. So that's a fun one to do, Tom, as you can see from the pictures.
Yeah, and I can also kind of split it up a little bit and put some soil in it as well, to kind of, rather than just the bale itself, as I understand it. But I've never done it. We've got some master gardeners that have done it. That picture is from one of our master gardeners' garden. Mm-hmm. They did it, but it's portable. You can get rid of it when you're done, and it may not be the best for every situation, but it just goes to show there's lots of different ways. Here's a picture of a wheelbarrow. This is a wheelbarrow that I have. This is in our backyard. The wheelbarrow, the wood kind of got old and rotten, and I couldn't use it anymore, but I turned it into a flower bed, and I'm growing stuff in it. So just about anything.
Anywhere. You can grow it anywhere. So just get it done, get it planted. Now, the bucket, the 5-gallon bucket, very easy to do. You plant those, you put holes in it, you put some soil in it. Notice we're not saying dirt, Tom. That dirt.
Don't say dirt.
Nerdy gardeners consider dirt a 4-letter word. So we've used soil a lot of times. So yeah, you fill that bucket with soil, and you have a garden. So it can be done anywhere.
And it's a lot of fun. We would encourage you all to do something, grow something, even if it's just getting the plant from the store and growing a flower inside. There's lots of different indoor plants, succulents and ivies and different things, ferns and things you can grow indoors. It just kind of brightens up your home and puts oxygen back into the air.
Tom, I was driving around somewhere, and I can't remember, but they had a big old pretty container, and it was in the wintertime, and they had grass growing in that container. I think it was wheat, and it was green, and it was about this tall, and it was actually pretty. So I mean, you can take a container, and then if we'd have left it alone. If we'd have left it alone all winter, it just kind of looked ugly and brown. But this homeowner put wheat or grass in this, and it had something green in there. So, it can be done anywhere, any type, depending on what you like. And just try it, just try it.
All right, here's our next question. Can plants grow without water? I'm going to say a big no. But there are different water needs for different plants, right?
So plants, water is one requirement that the plant needs. Now, some plants don't need nearly as much. What comes to mind, Tom, when we think of plants that's growing in a desert? What do we think of?
Well, like this picture here of these cactus.
Yep. So cactus, we don't get a lot of rain or moisture in the desert. It's desert areas. So, in Oklahoma, we may get as much water in one rain or rain event that they may get all year out in the desert. So plants have to have the ability to hold that water, store that water for later use. So a cactus, this picture here, you see that big base. A lot of those mechanisms inside that cactus is ways to hold water for later on. It may not rain again there for 6 months. So they have to be able to store that water and be able to utilize it when they need it. So that's a good survival mechanism for cactuses. What else comes to mind, Tom?
Well, there's different plants that they conserve their water really well because they don't get much water, but we also have plants that grow in water, like these aquatic plants here, these lilies and all different types of plants that actually grow in water. So they've kind of adapted to be able to do that as compared to the cactus, which doesn't get a lot of water. These others live in water. So lots of different water requirements for different plants.
Tom, we also have a style of garden that we do around here called xeriscape. Xeriscaping. Have you ever heard of xeriscape?
Yeah.
So xeriscape, we plant a lot of plants that, like cactuses, like other succulents, hen and chicks. Some of you may have seen hen and chicks. So a xeriscape garden once we plant it, we don't water it a lot, so it doesn't need a lot of water. And instead of mulch, we may use rocks as kind of a mulch layer. So you'll see a lot of xeriscape gardens in Arizona, some of those states that maybe don't get a lot of moisture. So they still want gardens, but they can't grow a lot of roses, a lot of, hostas, maybe azaleas. So they're going to pick plants that require very little or, don't need a lot of rainfall or a lot of water. Like we've mentioned, grasses, there's a lot of grasses, ornamental grasses that will do good with very little water. So a xeriscape garden, it comes to mind when we talk about little water or no watering.
Right. Well, and there's a category of plants called succulents that tend to need less water. And if you look at this picture here, you see their leaves. Their leaves are usually thicker, and if you were to squeeze it, they'd be squishy because, like the cactus, they store the water in those leaves so they can survive for a long period of time. So it depends on the plant, and there's lots of different plants, but basically they all need water, some degree of water. Even I know my daughter got me one of those air plants. Those are kind of popular. We have that hanging in the kitchen air plant. But even the air plant, once a month, you have to take it and just let it sit in a glass of water for a while. So it even needs water. So they all need water. We all need water. We basically need water to survive.
Correct.
All right. Next question, which this kind of might relate to water to some degree, but it says, what do I do when my plant turns brown?
Hey, that's a good question. And, we think the obvious, we think it's dead.
Right.
If a plant turns brown, it's dead. We get a lot of that, a lot of questions like that coming in. My plant's not looking very good. And we ask them how the leaves look, and they say brown sometimes. Well, sometimes plants do lose their leaves. A lot of plants in the wintertime, the deciduous, some of you may know that word, deciduous, which means they lose their leaves in the wintertime. So a lot of times it's kind of a normal process. We have in the summertime a lot of green leaves, and then as we go into the falls trigger the leaves to turn red sometimes, and then the red leaves will turn brown and fall off. So that's pretty normal. So a lot of times that's normal life cycle of a plant, Tom. So that's what comes to mind for me. What comes to mind for you?
Well, exactly. That's part of the normal process for some plants. But like in this picture here, you look at this one, when everything else around it is green and it's turning brown, there's probably some sort of problem. It's trying to tell you something. The key would be to try and figure that out earlier. But brown can often be a sign of some sort of disease or damage, maybe to the tree. Maybe the roots got cut from a backhoe that was working on something, or maybe, like I said, a disease. A lot of the diseases can get in there and affect these trees. So sometimes turning brown is an indication of something going bad, and other times it's just normal. But I would say if it's out of place, if everything else is green and it's brown, then there's something going on.
And again, we, as master gardeners, we get a lot of questions about this, and we like to hear it, but a brown or a dead limb, it's hard for us to figure out what's wrong with it. A lot of times, folks will get to us and bring us a limb with brown leaves, and sometimes it's hard, but we've done enough, we've went to school and we've studied enough on these trees to kind of know if it's going to be a disease, or if it did not get water, didn't get enough of water, and then it died, or hey, the leaves are going to fall off, but it's going to pop right back out. So we do get a lot of questions about is my tree dead? Just because it's brown doesn't necessarily mean it is, but let's talk about it and let's figure out why it's brown.
Right. And I'm glad you said that, because it reminds me, that if you do have a tree or a plant or something that's brown and you don't think it should be, it's the wrong season or whatever, you can call us at the Master Gardener office. There's the number there on the screen, or email us, or come by, and we will do our absolute very best to try and figure out what's going on to help you save it, or at least know what's happening with your tree or your plant, to do the best for it. So
yeah. That's a good question.
All these questions don't have a yes or no answer. They have a range of answers.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on here. And this is a good question. How do I know when the vegetables are ready to eat? Well, that's an important thing. We all want to eat them. And how do I know when I can go out there and start picking them and start eating them?
Man, a lot of time, I hate to use the word depends, because we've used that a bunch, but you take a vegetable. A lot of times it's just the firmness, Tom. You go and you squeeze a tomato, and if it's still pretty hard and pretty, not quite ripe or red, then more than likely it's not quite ready to eat or ready to pull off the plant. Let's take a cucumber. A cucumber is going to grow on a vine. Those you can eat pretty much. Y'all seen baby pickles. Those baby pickles was picked when they were still really little, when they were still babies. And then they picked them and then ran them through, a processor, and then pickled them basically and put them in a jar. On up to larger cucumbers that, may still be good, but they don't have the flavor of maybe those little pickles. So a lot of times it does depend on what size you want to pick. I know this picture here, Tom, is a squash. Squashes are one that, when they come off the vine, you could pick them when they're really small, or you could let them grow out and get bigger before they're ready to pick too. So, color comes to mind, like on that squash or on that tomato. Tomatoes have a tendency to turn red when they're ripe. But we also have some other shades of tomatoes that may not turn that red color. So we can't always go with color. Same for that squash. It'll come out yellow, or in a case of a zucchini, will come out green. And then as they get bigger and mature, they may go from green in the zucchini to starting to yellow up when they get big. And as they get bigger, they're not going to taste as good because they've started putting seeds on and they're getting old and pithy. So that comes to mind too, Tom. What kind of comes to mind with you?
Well, I would say one of the main things is you need to know what you're growing and what to expect from it. Like, for example, here is a picture of a tomato. This is a variety of cherry tomato. And if we were going to base when it was ready to eat on how big it gets, not knowing it was a cherry tomato, if you will, because they're small tomatoes, we might think, well, this one isn't ready to eat yet. We need to let it grow. But this one's actually perfectly ready to eat, as compared to this other tomato here, some type of a yellow tomato. Looks like it's much bigger. And if we would have eaten it when it was the size of that cherry tomato, it would have been bitter and probably kind of nasty, and we would never want to grow tomatoes again. You need to learn about what to expect. And part of it actually probably comes from trial and error too. And in your plants in your yard, and it's like, ooh, I should have let that grow a little bit longer before I ate that. But
Tom, I remember back in when I was growing up, again, Grandpa, I got a lot of love from gardening from Grandpa, and he had watermelons. And, he would go through and he would actually thump watermelons to tell you when it's ripe. So there's actually a sound that you can do for watermelons, going down the field and thumping it, knowing if it's ready to eat. So watermelon, think of how much water and sugar is in that watermelon the size of a basketball. And, if you pick a watermelon that size too early, it's not going to taste very good. It's going to kind of be sour and just not taste very good. So if you let it grow until the sugar content is perfect, you thump it, and something in there about that sugar and the thump that tells you when it's ripe. And then when it's right, when it's just perfect, that thump sounds good, then it's ready to eat. And there's nothing better than a good old watermelon in the summertime. So sound comes to mind on that.
Yeah, I try to buy our watermelons in the summer from this kind of roadside garden stand. And it's always the same guy that's there. And I'll just go up there and want a watermelon. He'll ask me, well, which one you want? And I said, you pick it. And he'll just reach down there and boom, boom. There's a good one right here. Now whether he's just selling me a watermelon or not, but I've never got a bad watermelon from the man. So he knows his watermelons. You get to learn that sound, the feel.
Learn that sound.
Yeah, the color, the bottom of it, whether it's got the whitish and not green. Anyway, it's part art and part science, I guess I would say.
It is. And if you think about it, this picture here shows a big field of watermelons that farmers are harvesting. So, these guys are going through and, in this big, big field, they're going to pick a few that's ripe and then leave the ones that's not. So they have to be able to do it really, really fast. So these workers are really good at knowing what's ready to harvest and what will be ready next week. So that comes to mind too, that picture of the watermelon field. Tom, another thought is smell. Right. That comes to mind. So some fruit and vegetables we can actually smell when they're ready. So explain that a little bit.
Well, the first one that comes to my mind, which has an absolutely wonderful smell, I think, is peaches. I mean, you can just, if you've got a peach and it doesn't have any smell whatsoever, that peach goes back down. I want those peaches that just smell that sweet peach smell. So that I would assume that smell is a signal that those things are ripe and ready to eat.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is, I mean, there's nothing better, not much better smell than a good peach, a good peach right off the tree. So, a lot of times, some we'll see people in stores smelling fruit and putting them back, smelling the right ones. And that's perfect. I would do the same thing.
Right. Well, that's another good question, though.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So here's another question. So if you plant two seeds at the same time, will they grow the same? Yes and no. They will both grow, but if it's a different variety, like for example, if you planted all tomato seeds, they're probably all going to grow the same and start popping up the same and start growing the same. But if you planted maybe some peppers and tomatoes, or maybe squash to me just takes off immediately and gets really big pretty quick. So they grow at different rates, but they don't necessarily grow the same. Like this is a picture here on some new little plants just started, and you can see they're all different heights, even the same variety are different heights. And then this picture shows a whole bunch of different ones, and it's pretty easy to see. You got different sizes, different shapes. Some are just barely poking out of the ground, and others there are maybe about 6 inches tall. So they grow, but not at the same rate.
So, it is amazing. And this is my old college book on vegetables. And remember, I said back a couple episodes about vegetable seeds, and there's everything you need to know. And each seed has been studied and researched on the right amount of temperature, the right amount of light that it takes to sprout or to germinate that seed. And tomatoes are different from cucumbers, that are different from cantaloupes, that are different from squash. So this is our Bible. This is our seed Bible. And if you want to know specifically, that it's been researched, it's been studied. So I've had this Bible, they've updated it, but it's really specific on that seed. So a lot of times we can just say, yes, we can go ahead and plant them, but some seeds are really going to need specific items done to them to get to germinate. So it's one of those, no, they're not all going to be the same. It's just like your friend, he may grow when he's 10 years old ahead of you. And then the next year you may grow past him. So it all really depends. It all really depends on the makeup and what's the type of seed, essentially.
Right. Well, and if you happen to go to a farmer's market or something, which we have some of those here in town, and you'll see a lot of times people that are growing things specialize on certain crops, and they do that way because they probably like it, they probably enjoy it, but they've done it for a long time. They've learned about it. They've learned how to care for it, and that particular crop. We've got one master gardener gal, her and her husband grow garlic, lots of garlic every year, way more garlic than they're going to eat, but they like it. They know how to do it. They've been doing it for years. They grow good garlic. They grow different varieties of garlic, and they sell it at the farmer's market. So part of it's a learning experience. You just don't do it your first year and be like wonderful at it. You do it for several years and decide what you're good at and what maybe you're not so good at, or what you're not interested in. It doesn't taste good. I thought I'd like eggplant, but I didn't. It was purple. I thought that'd be cool, but anyway. But anyway, nothing wrong with eggplant. But you grow what you can grow the best.
Yeah, that's good advice. And again, I mean, they're all going to be a little different to an extent, but yeah, do a little digging. And again, if you have any questions about it, you can ask either the master gardeners or your parents or your grandparents or whoever. But the thing is, just plant it and see what happens. Do a study, plant 2 tomato plants and see which one grows better, which one grows taller, and all that. And hopefully you get red tomatoes when they're ripe, you'll pick them.
Well, I like to grow the little cherry ones because as I'm out there working in the garden, I just sit there and pop, and I'll just
pop them in. Yeah,
I'll just have a little snack while I'm outside working in the garden.
Absolutely.
Any fresher than that. The only way I'd get fresh, I guess, is if I just put my mouth down there and just bit it off.
Eat them. That's right. You got to have ranch on those, Tom. You got to so you carry a little ranch around and
carry your bottle of ranch.
Yep.
Right. We're spinning off here.
We're getting there.
All right. So our last question today is, what kind of vegetables can I grow in containers? We talked about containers. There's like, what kind of vegetables can I grow in containers? Well, there's most vegetables you could grow in containers. I'm going to think of one right here that I probably wouldn't suggest growing in a container would be a watermelon. Here's a picture of a watermelon out in the field. Those watermelon vines spread out and the plants get huge and take over. And it seems like it would be a little challenging to grow that in a container. But a lot of stuff you can grow in containers: lettuce, tomatoes. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we love container gardening because they're kind of portable. We can plant them, and then when it's a nice day, we can take them outside. In the springtime, we can take them outside and let them grow. And then if it's going to get too cold, we move them in. And so that gives us some options there. Or we don't have a lot of sun in the area that we want, so we'll move those to the sunny areas, and then we can move them back. So portability comes to mind in containers, but man, and we can do a lot of different things. I'm thinking a nice, pretty tomato with in a big old container with a cage. Maybe those cherry tomatoes you were talking about, and then as they grow, that cage is there to help support them, and then you can pretty much pick cherry tomatoes from end of May to the end of summer, essentially, if you keep them watered. But lots of different things. I'm also thinking about a cucumber. I love cucumbers. Some of you probably do as well. And cucumbers can grow in a container. Maybe you have an area that you have a fence. Cucumbers are a vine, so they can either grow up on a trellis or on a fence, or you can let them kind of go spill down and grow down along, where they're, on that ground right above where that container is. So lots of different options with container plants for sure.
Right. For sure. Well, a lot of times the containers, I guess I would think maybe some of the smaller plants. The first one that comes to mind is lettuce. Lettuce is pretty easy to grow in containers, but like you mentioned, the tomatoes, there's a big plus here in Oklahoma to growing in containers as well, because in the springtime we tend to get these storms with maybe some hail or winds, maybe even tornadic winds or whatever. And if you got your plants in that container, you can go get it and put it in the garage for the storm and then put it back outside. Where the rest of us, our plants are all out in the yard somewhere, they might get beat down a little bit. So containers are pretty versatile. And you can grow just darn near anything in it.
Yeah, I'll agree. I mean, I think, and flowers, a lot of different flowers will do good in containers. Right. I know the question was about vegetables, but, we can plant flowers and think of how brown and just dreary outside the winter is. We've got winter flowers that will give us some color and will look good. So, and then we also got some winter vegetables that we can do also, Tom. So not only just summertime growing in containers, but lots of winter options as well, where we can plant in containers and have them, whether we eat them or enjoy them, or even cut the flowers and bring them inside as cut flowers out of that container. So we love container gardening.
Containers are a lot of fun. I like it.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, that wraps it up for today. Thank you all for being here. Good questions. I don't know if we should answer one or not. It seems like they keep getting harder every episode, but we will. We'll be back next week. And thank you, Brian Jervis, for being here. And
sounds good. You all happy gardening, everybody.
All right. We'll see you next time.